Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Come on in. Find your seats. Get yourselves comfortable. I know normally Kelly opens up the webinar, so if you've been to lots of our webinars before, you'll know Kelly is normally saying, hello, come in, tell us where you're from. And people think she always says, tell us what you've had for your tea, but it's not what she always says, but people always tell us what they've had for the tea. So, but tonight, Kelly and Chris and Kat will be leading the session. So Kelly's not opening up tonight. I'm going to be opening up for a little while, and then I will pass over to Kelly, which is kind of back to front, really. It's an unusual way round, but that's the way we're going to do it tonight. So I do 31 years qualified, and I was thinking about it the other week, and I think I've experienced imposter syndrome 3 times in the last couple of weeks since we've been talking about doing this webinar. I've been keeping a check on it, and I think at least 3 times in 3 meetings I've been to, I've thought I've definitely got some imposter syndrome going on here. So I'll bet that person who's been qualified 19 years is still experiencing imposter syndrome. This is not something that is unique to students and newly qualified workers. And in fact, I think some element of imposter syndrome is actually quite healthy. Actually, that's my view. Is there anything else going on in the chat there, Dave?
A lot of master's students, actually, they're all telling us now, people from Bolton. We've got someone here from Lagos, which I always say wrong. We've got Elizabeth saying that she just completed Step Up and is a complete imposter. But no, other than that, people just seeming in good spirits tonight.
So I am going to just introduce things and then pass over. So tonight is the first time, although we do lots of webinars where the Student Connect team will contribute and will try out activities and exercises and will give comments, but tonight is the first time we're actually handing over all together to 3 team members, because team members of the Social Work Student Connect team are now providing peer training. So I think you've done some university skills days, some ASYE groups, so peer group training, which I think is a fabulous idea and is working really well, and the feedback's great and it's all going great. But one of the topics that they've been looking at quite a lot, and I think has been coming up quite a lot, is imposter syndrome. And look, there's my imposter syndrome. I've just seen my typo on this slide. I've only done 1 slide for tonight and there's a typo in it. Look, it should say both from a student perspective and a new worker perspective, and it actually says form instead of from. But they've been looking at it from both students' perspective of imposter syndrome and newly qualified workers' imposter syndrome experiences. But what I would say is, as I did just say, anyone can experience imposter syndrome at any stage of their career, and actually there might be some benefits to it, but it's often makes people feel anxious, and that's aspects of what we're going to be exploring tonight. So I'm really looking forward to sitting back and just listening and really enjoying Chris, Kat and Kelly sharing with us their what they've been doing about imposter syndrome. So I'm going to go on mute and I'm going to hand over to Kelly, which is kind of back to front, Kelly, isn't it? It's normally you handing over to me.
It is, yeah. Thank you. That was quite nice, that, to listen to it from the other side. That was really interesting. So yeah, like Siobhan says, tonight we're going to talk about imposter syndrome, and that starts with us introducing ourselves. So straight away, I'm feeling a bit of an imposter because I'm thinking, well, I'm here every week and now I've got to talk about myself is a little bit different. So I'm Kelly. That's me in the middle. Like Siobhan said, we've delivered this training a couple of times to universities, and on the first time we delivered it, I realised that I was wearing the exact same clothes as I was in that picture, and it completely threw me. I was like, not only should I not be here, but they're going to think that I've not ever got changed, and I just was like, I don't know what to say. So it completely threw me. So yep, I am a social work student. I'm in year 2. I've had lots of various different roles, as well as being part of the Social Work Student Connect team. And I am passing over to Kat, if you're ready.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I'm feeling imposter syndrome tonight. We were saying that this is our 6th time delivering this out to people, and I'm feeling pretty nervous, so go easy on us. I'm Kat. I'm newly qualified, 6 months into my ASYE, so supported year in practice in child protection team. I'll pass over to Chris.
That's short, sweet. So I'm I'm Chris. It's funny, isn't it, how you can do something so many times and still feel a little bit anxious about it, but I suppose that's a good thing. So I'm Chris. I'm also a newly qualified social worker. I work for an adults team in a local authority. As you can see there, I've studied with the OU. Kat and I did a lot of our study together, so we know each other really well. So, moving on, just checking my notes. So we wanted to just start by just giving you a bit of a format for tonight. We're going to be looking at what imposter syndrome is, why we experience imposter syndrome, and how we can overcome it. Hopefully just getting a few hints and tips together to manage that. So what does imposter syndrome feel like? Well, we got a few ideas here. We sat and sort of brainstormed this and thought, we can often feel like we're not good enough, we don't know enough. Big thing for me is I feel like I can't recall things quickly enough. So if I'm thinking about theories, I think, oh, I can't pull it to mind. We might be low in confidence because maybe we're starting again in a new role. I know Kat and I have obviously qualified not long ago, so we've had new roles and that's been a bit of a challenge. Uncertainty, worry about getting things wrong. That's obviously, that could be quite a big thing when we're dealing with people's lives. We can wonder if we've made the right decision, and that can be both in relation to the work that we're doing, but also maybe in relation to the roles that we've taken. It's really easy to feel overwhelmed when you've got lots of new information coming at you, and you can struggle to sort of fit in. And particularly when you've moved from being a student like Kat and I have into a job, or maybe when you're going into placement, it's that loss of a secure base, something new to be thinking about and focusing on, lots of new processes to remember, and just that overwhelming kind of feeling really that we don't want to look incompetent or like we don't know what we're doing. It's often a big one.
So definitions of imposter syndrome then. So I was just thinking, Chris, when you were talking there, that I'm feeling a lot of the things that you were saying about starting a new role, but from the perspective of going on placement. And I was just writing that in the chat, that you feel kind of like you've just got your head round starting the course and getting on the course and passing the first year, and then it's placement, and then it's like, oh, I've got to do this now, and it's a whole different kind of roller coaster. So I was just writing that in the chat. So imposter syndrome, so what do we know about it? So what we know about it is it's an internal experience. It's something that you feel inside, and it's about feeling like you're not as competent as other people think you are. So it kind of does have links to perfectionism, and a little bit later Kat will tell us about different styles of imposter syndrome. So it's that feeling of self-doubt, that feeling of anxiety, and I shouldn't be here. I'm not quite sure how I've got this place on this course because they're going to figure out I'm a fraud, or I'm not quite sure how I've managed to blag that interview. How on earth did I get this great placement? How on earth did I get that fantastic grade on that assignment or piece of work? It's that kind of self-doubt that, although if we sit and analyze it, we think, well, does everybody not feel like that? It's a kind of pattern, like a psychological pattern, where everything that we do, we kind of doubt, like our skills, talents, accomplishments. It can be all of those or one of those, or different on different days. And it's that feeling of being exposed as a fraud. And what we do know is that it can affect anybody. So it doesn't matter what your social status is, your work background, how experienced you are. It can affect everybody. So from those of you in the webinar today that are maybe you've just applied for the course to start soon, and you're thinking, how on earth did I fluke the interview, to people like Siobhan who were thinking, well, I've done it 31 years and I'm still feeling like an imposter 3 times in the last week. So I think it's really helpful to acknowledge that it is something that we do experience kind of along kind of our like professional lives and our personal lives as well. So I think if we go on to the next slide, please, Siobhan. So who experiences it then? So now we know kind of what it feels like. Who is it that gets imposter syndrome? So some research has been carried out, and what they kind of identified was it was usually high achieving individuals, which kind of doesn't make sense really. It's like you would think that people who are really good at what they do and are really high achieving would feel confident in that, but what the research has shown is that actually the more high achieving you are, the more likely you are to feel like a fraud and feel like you're going to be exposed, and somebody's going to come along and say, I'm sorry, you shouldn't be on this course, we've made a mistake, or you know, you shouldn't be doing this job. And I think it's really interesting that, you know, that you do have those feelings no matter how long you've been doing what you're doing. It was initially thought that it was more imposter syndrome affected more women than men. I'm not quite sure why that is, but recent research has shown that actually it affects people equally, men or women. We know that the sense of perfection that you can feel can sometimes be quite crippling. So the sense of failure, fear of failure, and we do know that the factors that relate to imposter syndrome could potentially have a negative effect on your professional role, and it is quite closely linked to other factors such as burnout, stress, and people having lots of time off, which we will kind of come on to a little bit later. So no matter what kind of place you are in your journey, you are likely to feel some kind of imposter syndrome. So Kat, over to you for journeys.
Thank you. So yeah, we just really wanted to point out that obviously everybody starts their journey at a different point, and that everybody's journey is different. And for both myself and Chris, we came about social work kind of completely backwards. I fell into it a lot later than I know a lot of other people have, and we were working for our local authorities before we got on our degree courses, and so we kind of, it took a long time to get to where we are, and feeling as though you're getting to that last hurdle and completing your degree and thinking, okay, this is it, this is what I need to do, this is where I need to be. And then actually you get to that point and you realize your journey is just about to start, and the first bit was just to get you to the kind of beginning of that. And once we had our registrations, I think both of us felt a completely different type of responsibility.
Totally different journey then, wasn't it?
On our shoulders. And even though for Chris, she's in exactly the same team, her perception and you know, feelings have completely changed, and as have mine, because you've got a whole different lot of responsibility on your shoulders, and people's lives in our hands. And as Chris said previously, you've got decisions to make, and you need to feel confident and competent in what you're doing. And like the pictures there, you know, a lot of us do feel at times as though we are driving blind, or though we are on our own, and we need people around us to make us feel as though we are secure and safe and we are doing well, which the team really helping us and support with. So I really appreciate everybody. Go on to the next one. So this is something that we've been delivering, obviously, as we've said, to different universities and local authorities for newly qualified workers, and we were looking at different imposter styles. If you just click on again and it will bring them up. So we have 5 different imposter styles. The first one is the perfectionist, and that is something that I definitely identify myself as, because I am never satisfied and always think I can do better. I tend to fixate on any negative point that I can find, and then I will overanalyze it and overthink it until it becomes just so big in my head that I feel like a complete failure. So that's kind of my imposter style. Moving on, we've then got the expert, so always trying to learn more, never satisfied with their level of understanding. And I think we've identified Chris, you know, she likes to,
got a bit of that.
Yeah, a bit of that in with you as well. Then we have the soloist, tends to be an individual and prefers to work alone, and reject offers of assistance. Although I think, you know, starting a new role or going into placement, it's very hard to accept help and support when you're feeling as though you need to be showing you're competent. And it's very difficult to potentially show those vulnerabilities initially. You need to feel secure in where you are. So potentially we could all be there at that point during our placements. Next one is the superhero. So always pushing themselves to work as hard as possible and feels inadequate. And then we have the final one, which is the great mind. So somebody who sets themselves up with really big goals and feels crushed when they don't succeed them.
And I think you have a poll here, weren't you, Kat?
Yeah, we've got a poll, so I will just launch that now. Couldn't do it whilst I was talking. Not very good at multitasking. So here we go. So the poll's coming up, and this is asking you all about what your imposter style is. Can you identify that you are just one of those, or are you a mixture? Does it depend on what day of the week it is?
Yeah, I think, Kat, I'm the soloist. I think it's not about rejecting offers of assistance, but it's about trying to make yourself look so competent that nobody thinks to ask, because you kind of give that air of, I'm okay, I don't need any help, I know exactly what I'm doing. And I think that can sometimes make people feel like, oh, you don't need any help. Do you know what I mean? I think it's
yeah, no, I agree, actually.
I identify with, definitely.
I had a conversation with my colleague at the weekend, and I said, you know, has your perception of me changed now 6 months down the line? And she said, yeah, completely. You know, at the beginning you were very much, I know what I'm doing, I don't need any help, I'm competent, I'm confident, I'm doing this, that and the other. And actually now she's saying, you know, you are opening up and saying to people, this is hard and I do need help, and I have the understanding that everybody else has. So I'm kind of cracked open my shell a little bit, and you know, showing my true self to everybody on the team, because it's difficult to be vulnerable in those situations. So let's have a look then at the results. I think
that's a sign that you've relaxed a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. Oh, well, we have 40% of people that are here tonight have identified as a perfectionist, and we have 36% who are saying that they're a mixture of all 5, and the lowest one that we have is the great mind at 2%.
I wonder whether that says something about the type of imposter syndrome that social workers and social work students tend to have. I think if anybody wants to do a PhD, not me, but there's something in there. I'm looking at you, Chris. Finish your masters first. But if you did want to do a PhD, you could look into that, into kind of, is that typical of social workers? Do you all tend to have a similar imposter style, or is that due to something else? There's a bit of work in there for you.
I think we're constantly,
might be a character trait.
Maybe. Constantly looking, aren't we, to try and complete everything on that to-do list. However, that to-do list just gets longer and longer by the day, and then your inner perfectionist is feeling as though it's failing.
Interesting though. So moving on from what's your imposter style, we're going to look at a little bit more in detail, why do we experience imposter syndrome. So we've talked a little bit about the types of imposter styles, and maybe there is a little bit of work in there about are particular types of people attracted to social work, which means they've got particular personality traits. I don't know the answer to that, but I think in terms of being a social work student, I think it could be that we are surrounded by others that know more, which by definition we have to be, because we're learning. We need to be surrounded by people who know more, otherwise we won't learn anything. But then could that impact how you feel about yourself? We've spent years studying, so if, like Chris and Kat, you finished a degree, you're like, yep, I'm sorted, I'm fine now. You spent years studying, and then you go into the real world and you're suddenly like, it'll all be okay when I'm a social worker, but actually you've got even more to learn. You know, you've got that extra pressure that having your registration kind of adds on. Chris and Kat spoke about that as well. And we're always trying to appear competent. So I know that we're supposed to be very good at reflecting and being humble and saying that we're always learning, but is it good for a social worker to say to somebody, I don't know anything about that, I don't know? Is it, you know, it's that really fine balance, isn't it, between appearing kind of humble and wanting to learn, to not putting yourself out there and saying, I've got absolutely no experience of that. You need to be able to put people at ease. And I think it's a very fine kind of balancing act. And obviously we're always pushing to get to the next level, and we're always trying to kind of get ourselves ready for the next challenge and work in a way that we can keep progressing and keep learning, so we don't learn stuff and then become stagnant and say, right, we've learned it now, we're social workers and we're doing great, and let's just keep doing what we're doing. We're always trying to improve and trying to reflect. So if you can see that little duck on the bottom there, if you go on to the next slide, it should get a little bit bigger. So is anybody feeling like this? Just a duck sailing along, everything's going fine. That's how people see you. I can see Kat laughing, because that is very much the image that you put out. We see you and you're very competent and you seem to be doing a great job. You've got all the tech stuff sorted. And then is that what is actually happening underneath? Possibly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I remember us having the conversation
like crazy.
You just started your new job, and I think you were quite, you found it quite difficult, didn't you? Like right at the start, and you're going to talk about the dip later on, aren't you? But
yeah,
we were like, gosh, I thought you were doing great, because you just came across like you just settled straight in. And I think that's something that I'm going to be quite conscious of when I complete the course. But at the moment I'm doing my first placement, and a lot of my reflections have been around how I've settled into placement. So I wrote a reflection around kind of, I felt a little bit like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just like organising my diary and speaking to people and doing stuff like that, which is on the kind of induction like checklist. But at times I felt a little bit kind of left to get on with it. And at times that's made me feel a little bit anxious and a little bit worried. But then on the flip side of that, I think my practice educator has probably thought, well, you're confident, you're doing okay, you can just get on with it. And it's that kind of balance of, you know, do I put that across that I'm absolutely fine, I don't need any help, or do I kind of check in a little bit more, like, you know? And it's that kind of balancing act of just getting the support you need but asking for it, but then also being vulnerable and kind of looking like you need the support. So that's something that I'm going through at the moment. And I keep saying I've just started my placement, but I'm on like week 5, which it feels like day 5 if I'm honest. But yeah, that's definitely me at the moment. Chris?
I can't believe you've been there 5 weeks already. That's really surprised me. How that time is flying. So just sort of moving on to the next bit, you know, we really liked this visual representation of the conscious competence model, which I can never say. And we did have a webinar where we talked about this, and I can't remember what number it was off the top of my head. But, you know, this is something that's kind of quite important in imposter syndrome, and recognizing where we are in that cycle. Because, you know, when you start, certainly for me, when I sort of started my job, there were certainly elements of fear with the change that I experienced, even though I stayed in the same team, from going from being unqualified into a qualified role. And there was definitely a bit of fear with that. But then, you know, you kind of move through these cycles where you're testing things and you're learning things, and I sort of feel almost like, you know, in my job where I've been working since 2012, I was expected to know a lot of things, and it kind of is quite difficult to come back to a place where you realise that you still are learning, and there still is a lot to learn and to build on, and you have to accept that in order to then be able to move on. You've got to be open to it. And the one thing I've noticed certainly about my own journey in relation to this model is that actually I kind of go up and down the curve and round and back again. And when there are different things that I'm learning, I might feel like I'm really consciously competent and really integrated with one particular aspect of work, but actually when something new comes up, I'm going to be right back to the beginning, because, you know, like just at the moment, I've picked up a new case that I'm going to have to take to the Court of Protection, something I haven't done before. So I'm going to be right back at the beginning with that whole kind of fear aspect of, okay, this is new and it's really important. I need to make sure that I get it right. So I just think it's important that people recognise that actually this is not just a linear thing that we go through and suddenly we reach the end and we're all integrated and everything's happy. Actually, we can go round and round in circles as we grow and develop. And I guess that's probably partly why people who, you know, like Siobhan, have been in the job 30 plus years still get this, because there's always something new to learn in social work. So it's just important to recognise that, really.
Yeah, I agree. So I remember Siobhan saying about this dip to us last year, and she said, you know, there'll be at least a couple of dips during your journey once you've qualified. And I thought, oh, okay, well, we'll see what happens. You know, I've chose where I want to be. I'm confident in the area that I want to work. I've completed my degree. I'll be okay. And then you start, everything's kind of going along smoothly, and then all of a sudden there's a bit of a dip. And for me, I've had quite a few dips actually during the last 6 months. I've had some real lows and some real highs, and every day is completely different. And as Chris was saying, you know, we are working with individuals. Everybody is different. We're never going to be working, even though we're coming across the same situations, we're not going to be giving the same advice or the same support, because it's not going to work for everybody that we're working with. And I had a really difficult case that I'm still working, supporting a family, and I had to write my first Section 7 report for court. First court experience of being cross-examined, which went on for 6 hours plus, and the barrister focused straight away on the fact that I was newly qualified, and how could I possibly make those decisions, you know, with my lack of experience. And I just came out of there thinking, well, that's it. You know, I obviously don't know what I'm doing. And I really did hit a real big dip with that. But I actually had some really good feedback from the judge the following day, and he was going along with my recommendation based on the evidence that I gave, because he found as though I was confident and I was competent with what I was saying. And that gave me kind of hope, really, and a bit of light. So I have gone up and down, definitely. And when we've been delivering these skill sessions, there was one point, I think, where I was hanging off the bridge. And then there was one point where I got to the top and I was feeling okay. And I was, yeah, okay, I'm really good. I've relaxed. I've got over my dip and I'm feeling much better. And then something else happened and I was like, yeah, I'm in the choppy waters. So it's not always going to be, you know, sunshine and rainbows and butterflies. It's going to be difficult, but with the support that you have, your team makes a massive difference. And definitely peers and colleagues, you know, I talk to Chris on a regular basis, and we're definitely a great support for each other, and it makes such a big difference. But there will always be something lurking around the corner, like this tiger, that will throw you off course. So we need to be prepared for things that are going to happen, and know that, as other people have said during this, even 20, 30 years down the line, we're going to come across things that we don't necessarily feel 100% confident in, but every day is a school day and we need to continue learning.
Definitely, definitely, Kat. Yeah, so just looking at really kind of why do we feel this way? And, you know, some of the things that Kat has said, you know, we're going to face things that we haven't come across before. We're going to face different situations. If you're a student, you might be thinking, well, I should feel amazing. You know, I've got a place on a course. You might have lots of experience before you get on the course. but you can still feel like an imposter. You know, everybody else deserves a place on the course apart from you. You know, somebody's going to come and say, actually, we've checked your grades and they're not the right ones. Sorry, it was an admin error. Or, you know, we've checked the numbers and we're oversubscribed, so you'll have to come back next year. Or you're just not on the list. You know, we can have all these thoughts that, you know, somebody is going to find us out and they're going to realize that we're a fake or a fraud and we really shouldn't be there. You know, we should feel amazing because we're on a course. It could be a really good course. You could have qualified and you've got all the latest information and all the latest theory knowledge. You know, you're thinking, right, I'm absolutely armed to the teeth with everything I need to know. Let's do it. And then think, I don't know what I'm doing. You know, you've demonstrated you're a qualified social worker if you've just got your first ASYE post. You know, you've absolutely aced the interview and you're thinking, I can't believe somebody's going to pay me to do this. You know, this is great. But often we don't feel like that. You know, we've got, we can face lots of change and uncertainty, especially at the moment. You know, we can kind of experience the loss of a secure base. I'm on placement and I'm thinking it is completely different from being at uni, where I know where everything is. I know all the buildings, I know who everybody is, I know what door to go in, I know what times things happen. I'm on placement, I know none of that. You feel like you've done a really good job if you've just finished your course and you've got right up to the top, and then you start in your new job and you're not really sure what's happening. A massive feeling of responsibility that I've heard Kat and Chris talk about. You know, you get your registration and suddenly it's like, oh, I need to actually do it now. And we realise that a lot of the time we've been sheltered and protected either by our lecturers at uni or our practice educators on placement, and that actually you're a social worker and you've got your big social work pants on and you've got to actually do the job. And kind of just coming back to change and uncertainty at the moment, there's so much of that is happening that, like Kat said earlier, everybody's journey is different, but there are so many different starting points now with the impact of COVID, Kat. So that's something that you're going to talk about, isn't it, with the impact of COVID?
Yeah, so definitely. If you've been coming to the webinars for a while, you would have heard all of us talk about the impact of COVID, and both mine and Chris's placements being cancelled kind of partway through last year and us going back to working in our substantive posts, which meant a lot of working from home, you know, being in isolation and not getting those potential experiences that we were hoping for. So I spoke about the impact of moral injury in a previous webinar. I think it was webinar number 3. And it's just really to kind of understand the blurred lines now between work and home, because a lot of us are working from home. Social work's coming into kind of every corner of our life, and we're having to balance and juggle a lot more kind of priorities than we were previously. And starting in a new post for me, I didn't know anybody in the team. It was completely new. I'd only recently just moved as well. I had both the children starting new schools, and having to work from home and only really see the people in the office on a couple of occasions made that really difficult to integrate with them. And only now really am I feeling as though I'm part of the team, kind of 6-7 months in. So people that haven't actually been able to go in at all, it just must be so difficult for them. And I'm glad, hopefully, that we will start with the restrictions easing, people getting back into the office, because it's been such a difficult time for everybody, and so isolating as well. Yeah, the only other thing that I would, yeah, I was going to say the only other thing that I would say as well that we've spoke about quite a lot is, with us working from home, it's been a lot easier to continue working much longer hours, because, you know, I'm sat at my kitchen table, I was working today, then I will carry on and, you know, an email will pop up and I think, okay, well, I better sort that out. Or I'm cooking dinner whilst the laptop's on the table, and then I carry on and I say, yeah, okay, I'll finish in a little while. You don't have that the same as before. So you would stay at work, you'd finish, that would be it, that would be the cutoff. Whereas now we are working so many more hours and constantly you know, I'm constantly thinking about work because it's in my home, and I have to make sure that I am prioritizing myself and my family and turning that laptop and that phone off, because otherwise you can get drawn into working crazy hours, and just having it kind of crowding your thoughts all the time makes it really difficult.
I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, I spoke about that.
I was just going to say, I wonder if this is actually the working from home and the cooking your dinner at the same time as working and all that, which I think everybody can identify with. I wonder if that's making imposter syndrome for new workers even more likely, because you're doing it at home, you're not doing it in a work, you've not got the kind of working environment that surrounds you where you feel like I'm fitting in here. Because you're doing it from home, that fear of they're going to find out I'm a fraud, I wonder whether that's even more significant, that working from home aspect of that. I don't know. I didn't want to interrupt you there, but I was just thinking about that working from home having an impact on it as well. So.
I completely agree, because you don't have the ability to listen in on the conversations that you would normally with all the experienced workers, and you don't have somebody to turn around to and just say, where can I find this referral form, or who should I refer this person to, who's the best person to speak to about this. You're constantly having to look and think, oh, okay, well, that person's on red, that person's busy, that person's not here, who am I going to talk to? And everything just takes so much longer.
You know what, Kat? I was just thinking when Siobhan was talking that my placement's a mixture of working from home and going into the office. So I tend to do about 2 days on site and tend to concentrate those days with face-to-face stuff. But I found when I'm working from home and I might have Zoom meetings or Teams meetings and groups and whatever, and bits of reading and research and stuff, I found that I can do the exact same amount of work and types of work at home that I would do if I was in the office. But when I'm at home, I'm kind of anxious that, am I doing enough? I'm anxious that nobody's there and nobody sees what I'm doing. So I'm thinking, am I doing enough? Do I need to do something else? Do I need to make my diary look obviously busy? You know, so people can see it. And I end up doing more because of that. I end up like working a bit longer, or eating my dinner while I'm working, or
you don't have a lunch break because you think, well, if the phone rings, what they're going to think I'm skiving or I'm doing something else.
I'll go to the toilet and I'll bring my phone with me, because it's like, well, I can, you know, they're not going to know that I've gone to the toilet. If you're in an office and all your stuff's there, they think, well, she's probably just gone to the toilet. But I think it's really hard to not overcompensate and do even more than you would be, because you feel, you know, like it's even more important. But I could do the same amount of work at home as I would do in the office, but your mind kind of views it differently.
I agree, and I actually spoke about this in my supervision yesterday, because I've just found after a year of working at home under COVID, and a lot of my year under COVID was spent dealing with people who are in hospital, work with a lot of older adults, and actually, you know, as this slide is talking about distribution of resources and social work time, and that was a really big thing from my team in that period, and it's really hard. And actually I said to my manager yesterday, my kitchen has become a less enjoyable place to be, and anybody who knows me will know that I love being in the kitchen. It's what I do to relax. So for me to feel that way is really hard, and as a result I'm actually going to be back in the office every day, because I feel as if I am more confident and more productive when I'm there. Even though I probably do the same amount of work as you said, Kelly, I just feel differently about it. I feel like I'm in the right place to do what I need to do. So it's having that confidence that just having those people around you, even if there's not many of them, just gives you extra confidence that you are doing the right thing, because you know you are in your head, but that imposter syndrome that we all have makes us doubt ourselves when we're kind of physically removed from that situation. So I do think it is a really important point. And especially because of the work that we're doing being a lot by phone, especially with older people, because of course everybody was shielding during COVID and wasn't up for visits. You know, the risk to that particular client group is huge. So, you know, even now we're having to literally justify why we want to make a visit to somebody if it's face to face, and why we can't do it by any other means. And it has impacted on our ability to form relationships with people and to work effectively. So it's just interesting. You can see obviously here that Turner in community care has noted this as being an important point, where we need to be able to develop relationships with people so that we're effective, and by not being able to do that, it's probably making us feel worse about being imposters. And I suppose part of our reflections, whether we're students or newly qualified workers or been in the game for a long time, we need to step back and reflect about that and really pull it apart and say, well, am I feeling this way because I'm no good, or actually am I feeling this way because of these other factors, and really try and separate it out. And I think I've spent quite a lot of time over this last year really doing that, and especially in the last 6 months since qualifying. So yeah, it's just important to recognise it and take time out to think about it. And as I've said, obviously adult social workers in particular, it's difficult when you're trying to visit people, and that increases the stress. And I guess this slide really just cements what I've just been saying about that. Not being able to see those people, not being able to have your colleagues around you hearing your conversations. And for me, obviously working with older people, I do have times where people on my caseload pass away, and I've had people who've passed away from COVID. But actually, when you're sitting at home, you can't sort of turn around to your colleague and say, oh, that's really sad, so and so's passed away, or something like that, and then you're searching through Skype looking for a green light to see if there's somebody you can talk to. It's really, it just makes it more difficult and more challenging.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. So here we were talking about barriers, and everybody obviously has different barriers, and so that you need to be able to understand what they are for you, because they're not going to be the same for everybody. What's getting in your way of you kind of overcoming your imposter syndrome and feeling more confident, and what can you do to overcome them? What help might you need, and when will you know that it's working? So obviously for me, I've said my imposter style is the perfectionist, and that I find it really difficult at times to ask for help and support, because I don't like looking incompetent. And even though I come across as kind of confident and calm and organized, underneath I am like that duck thinking, oh my god, I don't know what I'm doing. And it is really difficult to show that kind of vulnerability, and you need to be in that right space and have the right people around you, and to be able to put yourself first at times and make sure that you are looking after yourself, because we do need to be kind to ourselves in this profession. There are times when it becomes so overwhelming that you need to be able to have somebody around you, or to be able to step back and say, I need a bit of time for me. I need to do this, that, or the other. And for me, it's been really blocking out some time to take off and have time away from work, because it's been just becoming everything that I kind of think about. It can become consuming. I was having times where I would wake up and then I'd constantly be thinking about what I've got to do the next day, or the particular family that I'm working with. And I know on one of the cases that I was working with, and my first removal that I had to do, as soon as that was over, it was kind of 8-9 o'clock at night one Friday evening. Everybody else had obviously gone home, and Chris was the first person I called, because you need to be able to have somebody to talk to. And go through those kind of feelings that you're having, and for somebody else to be able to understand that, because it is really difficult, and you can then slip back into feeling as though you are an imposter because of the feelings that you're having.
Hard to go home after something like that and have nobody to be able to tell. And that's why, you know, certainly for me and Kat, we've been a massive support to each other.
Yeah.
Because that's what we do. We're just able to ring each other and go, oh my goodness, this has happened, or I've had to do this, or whatever it might be, or I'm feeling really like this. And actually we've just really supported each other through these difficult times, and I think that's a really important thing, to have somebody who you can turn to, who,
Yeah,
you know, you can actually just tell them how you're feeling.
and I think that we've noticed so much obviously we've only delivered a few of these sessions so far to other newly qualified workers and some students, but they've all said how beneficial it's been for them to know that somebody else is feeling the way that they're feeling. And we all need to know that we are all going to go through this at some point. It's not just in isolation. We all feel like it, and we will continue to feel like it up and down throughout our journey. And if we've got people around us that we can share those feelings with and talk things through, then that's going to be, the most beneficial thing that you can have.
Yeah, I think you're definitely each other's critical friends, aren't you? You're definitely, as well as being actual friends, definitely each
but
other's
in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, critical in keeping each other on track and being able to reflect with each other, definitely. So obviously, as I'm still a student and these two guys are, qualified, I'm going to say that, theory is really important. If you were with us on our share webinar, you will have heard a lot more about this, but using kind of a simple model like share can just help you to kind of look at what's going on and look at the things that you're experiencing. I think it is really important that we do keep emphasizing that it's not about overcoming imposter syndrome and becoming better. It's about acknowledging it, understanding it, looking at how it affects us, and developing strategies. Like Kat said, what are your barriers to the work you do, to how you feel. It's going to be different for everybody, but using the kind of share model, kind of like looking at what we're doing, and listening to ourselves and listening to others, and then if we need to, making adjustments to our practice, kind of, how does that inform what we do and what we do next? I definitely won't be selling any of my social work books, because I think that I've read one and then I think, oh no, what was that? Was that in that book? So I'll just keep hold of them. My wife says I'm not allowed to buy anymore, but not sure whether she's listening to the webinar, but I haven't bought any recently. And kind of being honest and reflecting on your interactions, getting a critical friend, if that helps, somebody you can say, well, have you considered, or what's going on there, or if it is somebody like Kat who thinks that she's doing a bit rubbish, saying, get a grip. You're not. You're absolutely
Never
not.
said that to you, have I?
No.
Sometimes we need that, though. Sometimes we need somebody to say, really?
You're always there for that, Kelly.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll play that role. But yeah, I think that kind of element of self-awareness and being aware of what others are thinking is really important.
Yeah, definitely. And it takes time. During my placements, it's definitely something that I've got better with over the years. And I am really starting to find it a lot easier now. Last year was really difficult during my final placement, and I found it quite difficult to be able to open up and share those feelings with my practice educator. And I understand now just even more how important it is to be self-aware. We need to obviously try and understand ourselves and what we feel about ourselves or think about ourselves, but also taking on board what others do, and kind of really considering how other people see us, and what perception they have of us. So in doing this, a few of us have completed the Johari's window. Obviously, it's a simple tool that you can use for improving self-awareness and gives you a better understanding. So we've had members of the team complete this for us, both myself and Chris. And I also sent it round to some of the members on my team. And I think it's a really good tool to use in you know, team supervision or, you know, team meeting, anything like that, to be able to get that discussion going, because there's things in there that I didn't realize that other people were seeing about me. And actually, since I've had conversations about it, it's made me feel more confident in myself, because that's how others are perceiving me. And maybe I'm doing a little bit better than I thought I was. Maybe I need to stop being so critical of myself and really kind of opening up to the fact that I'm doing all right, not doing too bad.
We just thought it was a really great tool, and there is a version of this available online, and I think if we can get the link out with our resources to you, then we will. But we just thought we would share our results, because they come in two formats. So these are all the people who did Kat's Johari window, and these are the words that they found that they've associated with her. There is some crossover, as you can see.
Yeah, see, lots of intelligence in there, and that's certainly not something I would describe myself as.
No, because you're not intelligent with a first-class degree.
Well, I think it might have been just a fluke, you know, maybe like Kelly said, maybe they got it wrong and they're going to ring me up soon and say, no, sorry.
Imposter syndrome, perhaps. But it's really interesting, and I did wonder whether, you know, the better that somebody knows us, maybe they see different things, which is interesting. So I'm planning to send my results round to not only to my team members, quite a lot of whom are new, but also to other people who know me really well, and see whether there's a difference in their perception. Siobhan, if you could just move on to the one that's got the different sort of setup. So if you follow this link and you do this, use this tool, you'll see that there are different ways of looking at it. And I thought this was quite nice, because it shows you know, how different people see you and how many people see you in that particular way as well, which is quite nice. So I'm looking forward to sending this out to my team who know me really well, and to see what they think of me as well, because it can help to give you a different perspective. And there's another version, isn't there, Kelly? I can't remember what it's called now, which perhaps might help people to focus on the slightly more not negative, but you know, that other side.
Areas for improvement. Yes.
Thank you. That's
the other one. Version is where it has, instead of having positive qualities, it has kind of areas for improvement, like frustrating, annoying, yeah, short-tempered, and it's called a Johari's window. So if you go on the website that I put in the chat where we got this from, there is a link to that as well. But they do recommend don't do that straight off, because it's
feeling brave.
critical. You know, do this first, figure out what you're good at and what other people think you're good at, and then maybe look at what you could improve on. Yeah, don't just go straight in for the other one, because quite harsh.
Might need a thick
ask
skin.
Somebody you trust. Yeah, well, or ask somebody whose opinion you really trust, if that, you know, if you want to know, because let's face it, we've all got areas that we can build on and improve on, haven't we? But I think, you know, certainly for me, I've got to be in a place of feeling open to listening to that, and willing to deal with some of it, because it's not always, you know, it's not always easy, is it? No. But I think it could be really informative. So I am gonna tackle that as my little challenge to myself. I'm gonna tackle that at some point in the not too distant future, and see what comes out. So yeah, I might not share those results though.
Team.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. We'll see. Can we move on? Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So yeah, so moving on, just looking at our actions and our behaviours and the impact of them, and then following that, we're going to look at our own personal kind of top tips, if you like. But we've got a couple of slides that just have some coping strategies. So this one is all about the impact of our actions and behaviours. So you might have picked up that, you know, mine and Chris's and Kat's personalities are quite different. So Kat will say, you know, no, you're doing all right. You know, her self-talk is quite positive. You're doing all right. You're doing fine. My self-talk is get a grip. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes, you know, you need to, you know, I wouldn't say that to anybody else, but I would say it to myself. And that's maybe a little bit about kind of analysing that and kind of thinking, well, why do you talk to other people differently to the way you talk to yourself? And so I've been reading a little book on reflection, a reflective journal book. And one of the top tips in that is to give yourself the advice you would give a friend. So imagine it's not something you're struggling with, but it's something a friend is struggling with. And then to kind of analyse that in terms of, well, why is that different to what you'd say to yourself? And, you know, just to kind of look at the differences in that, if there are differences in that. So kind of, you know, having the courage to keep going, you know, we will succeed, hopefully, and believing in our own skills. So, you know, if you do a Johari's window and there's lots of things on there that, you know, your colleagues or your friends have said that this is what they really value, you know, we shouldn't automatically believe that that's not true. You know, we should kind of think, well, do I believe that? Is that the same as what I think? And then like looking at, you know, where's the disconnect there? Why is that different? And I think, you know, for me, the most important thing is kind of realizing that we are on a learning journey, and those people that think, you know, they know everything, it's quite dangerous, I think, to think, right, I've learned it now, I've passed the placement, I've got the degree, I've got the job, that's it, job done. And I think that's quite dangerous. And we've spoken a little bit in the chat about books. You know, I do joke that I have lots of books, but I genuinely do go back and read them. And I think that that's really important to keep on doing that, you know, because we need to give ourselves time to adapt and consolidate the learning, and also be honest about any kind of feelings or issues that arise in our reflections or in our practice. You know, there's nothing wrong with not understanding something, but there is something wrong in not looking at that and not trying to understand that. So if we just move on to the next slide, which has got some coping strategies. I'm not going to go on to all of these because some of these are things that I've just said and some of these are included in our top tips, but we will make sure that you get these when you get the resource list. So there's this slide and the next one, which imaginatively is called more coping strategies. You know, we try to keep things fresh. And then moving on again, we have Kat's top tips. So this is these are yours, aren't they? Your personal ones.
Yeah. So my top tips: be mindful, sorry, of the levels of responsibility once you start as a registered social worker, because they're not going to be the same as you've experienced as a student. I had a placement in a child protection team, and I also had a placement in a mental health team, and my placement in child protection did not get me ready for my experiences that I've had so far during my where I am now within my team, because it's a completely different role that you've got. You are the one that is responsible for those families and those children, and you don't have the kind of support around you as much as before, you know, where it would be kind of allocated to somebody else alongside you. Take your study time, really important. As soon as I started, I booked them out for the rest of the year. There have been a couple where I have missed, so I've kind of tacked them on to other weeks, because it's really important to be able to take that time away. Speak up and ask questions, ask for help and be honest if you're struggling or feeling overwhelmed. And as I said previously, that's something that I've started to be able to do a lot easier, and it's something that we should all be kind of, you know, raising those flags if we do need that support. Ensure you've got the coping strategies to deal with the pressures. So we've spoken about that briefly. For me, I go running, although I can't at the moment because I've hurt my foot, but that's something that helps me to clear my mind. I've also got a pillow spray which helps me to sleep. Chris likes cooking. We've all got different things that help us to deal with it. So find what yours are and definitely stick to them. And then organise your time. Make sure that you have got your portfolio kind of organised and take time off when you need it, and claim any back. I think I'm up to a ridiculous amount of hours on my flexi at the moment, and I will be taking them for May half term and switching my laptop and my phone off. So yeah.
I'll hold you to that, because I know how that's not easy for you to do, and it's not easy for me to do, and that's why I like the separation between office and home, because I switch the laptop off at the office and then I don't put it on again until I go back to the office. That's what's, that's how I separate and stop myself from working all the hours there are. So my top tips, some of them are going to be very similar to Kat's, but actually I think for me the biggest thing that I've learned is, even if you stay after you qualify, even if you stay working in the team that you've been for a long time, actually things will change and they will be different, and what's expected of you will be different. And I sometimes I have to remind the team around me who know me really well and have worked with me for a really long time that there are still things I don't know and still things I haven't done, because that's the nature of being newly qualified. You might know a lot of things about certain subjects but not so much about others, so it's still part of a learning journey. And again, as Kat has said, make good use of any study time that you have. We get, people get study time while they're on placements, which is really important. Make really good use of it and take the time and jump on some online courses or some webinars or read some books or do some placement paperwork or whatever you need to do. There is a lot of paperwork associated with both your placements and with your ASYE or your newly qualified roles. Make the time to do them and to actually focus on them, and don't leave it too long when you start a placement before you start filling things in, because it can very quickly get out of hand if you're not careful. And that's the point with the portfolio. Take charge of it. You drive it, not the other way around, because I've seen too many people while I was studying kind of panicking at the last minute and trying to write reflections and trying to get it all together and put it all in the right order and all those things. So just be really proactive with it would be my advice. We've spoken a couple of times already about critical friends, and I would say that is, of all my top tips, that's probably the toppest one of all, if that's even a word. Find a study buddy or a friend or a critical friend, someone who you can really trust and rely on for honesty, but not just honesty, but kind of positive honesty, because we all need a bit of that, don't we? We need to grow and we need to learn, but actually we need to do it in a positive way. Definitely take time off. I had some my team had been really short-staffed, and I had some time off in February, and I'd been feeling really under pressure and massively like an imposter at that point. And I only had a week off, and I can't believe how much different I felt just for having that week off. I was obviously just really tired and had been working really hard, and I hadn't necessarily recognized that in myself until afterwards. And having thought about it now, I'm now more aware of what to look for in myself to go, actually you need a few days off. So I'm being really mindful of that now. As we've said, try to leave work at work, or your study. Make some boundaries and stick to them so that you have time for work and time for study, but actually time for you and time for your families and time for your friends and all those other things that are important to us now. And particularly that we've had a year of really not being able to have those things. So you know, things are starting to open back up again, and we've got a bit more freedom and flexibility now to be able to meet up with family and with friends, and actually, you know, work will still be there, or your study will still be there. Yes, we've all got deadlines to meet, but make sure you have time for you, because it's important. That's part of self-care, isn't it? It's part of relaxing. And, you know, we've sort of joked in another group that self-care is not all smelly candles and spa days. And, you know, for me, my self-care is being able to switch the laptop off on time, being able to go out in my kitchen and make something nice, because that's what I enjoy doing. But whatever it is that is the thing that you enjoy doing and that helps you relax and helps you to unwind, do it. And celebrate the good things that happen. Social work is a hard job, and actually I think sometimes it can be very easy to focus on the negative things and the difficulties that people are having and the challenges, but, you know, have time to celebrate the good things. Keep a list or something of good things that have happened to you, and remember them, go back over it, because it will just help you to feel better about just everything in general. So those are my top tips. Kelly?
Absolutely. And I think on the topic of self-care, I find cooking really stressful, like having to get all the timings right, follow all the steps in the right order, unless it's something that I've made 100 times before and it doesn't really matter what you put in because it's roughly right. So I think, you know, you're absolutely right. It's about identifying what works for you, and like Kat said, knowing what your barriers are. And one of my kind of biggest things for self-care is not comparing yourself to others. You know, I could feel really bad that you know, everybody loves a spa day or everybody loves cooking or that kind of thing, but it's about knowing yourself and knowing what works for you, like Chris said. So don't compare yourself to others, and whether that's to do with self-care or it's to do with grades that you get or it's to do with your classification of degree or the job that you're doing, I think it is really important not to compare yourself. Obviously, kind of healthy competition is good, but not if it's going to make you feel worse and it's going to make you kind of, you know, make that feeling of imposter syndrome even worse. So I think you know, keep learning as well. You know, one of my top tips is keep learning. Like I'm quite vocal about the fact that I don't enjoy reflection, or at least I don't think I do. I only have to see the Gibbs kind of cycle and it just gets me angry. I just think, why is there so many questions? Do I have to answer all of them? Do I have to do it in that order? But then I did do a reflection which was based on the reflective onion for placement, and my practice educator was saying, well, you obviously are reflecting, you obviously are very kind of thoughtful. So it kind of did change my view a little bit. And I used the weather model, which works really well. So in typical kind of me style, I've only really done half a job because I used the onion model to reflect on before I did a session, and then I was going to reflect on it in the middle and then on it at the end after I'd done it. So with it being a component model, you could do it at any point. So I've got 2 jobs to do yet, but I will do it. I will get around to it. And I think as well, you know, not knowing is okay, but not asking isn't. And I think because we are going into social work profession that is quite, you know, like these guys have said, quite difficult, the temptation is there to think, you know, I need to put this kind of facade across that I do know everything, when actually it is a balancing act and it's okay not to know. There's some things that you absolutely do need to know, you know, you do need to meet the standards, but you know, if you need to find something out, that's absolutely fine. And I think, you know, we've spoke about this earlier, and students are the profession's safeguard. You know, we do have the most recent knowledge, and the as students and newly qualified social workers, that's something that I've heard quite recently from our principal social worker. And I think as well, kind of, you know, my last 2 top tips are logging everything that you do so you can see how far you've come. and keeping a bad day kit. So I think we did do a webinar on endings, and I'm sorry, Dave, I should have given you the webinar title, and I can't remember which one it was, but as I'm a visual learner, I know that the thumbnail is of a butterfly, if that helps. But it was all about keeping a bad day kit, all the thank you cards that you get, that kind of thing. Keeping them together just so that you can kind of have a look at why you started doing what you're doing and how is it going and that kind of thing. Because I think when you are feeling that imposter syndrome and you are feeling a bit like a fake and you're going to be exposed as a fraud, you can look at all the positives and think, actually, is this true? You know, do we need to weigh this up a little bit? So on to the next slide. There's just a few ideas on how to kind of build your own top tips. So you will get a list of the coping strategies that we talked about on the resource list, and you will be able to watch this back. But I think it's really important that, you know, like these guys have said, you identify your own barriers and acknowledge them. It's not enough just to say, well, one day I'll not feel like an imposter, because you probably will feel like that for a while. Even if, you know, how many times you feel like an imposter the spaces get bigger in between, you know, chances are you probably are going to feel a bit of a fraud, and acknowledging that. And then creating your own tips on how to overcome, you know, those feelings of feeling like you're not quite doing a good enough job. You know, have a look on the Johari's window on the link that was in the chat earlier that will be on the resource list. Do the No Harry's window if you're feeling really confident that you do want some kind of areas to build on, and trying to be objective about any feedback that you get. So, you know, is this feedback, bearing in mind that it doesn't matter who's giving you the feedback, that's something to act on. Is the advice that you would give a friend the same as the advice that you would give yourself? So that kind of thing really, but there's lots and lots of tips on the other webinar as well. So as we've kind of come full circle, this is what we started with. What does imposter syndrome feel like? So all these feelings of I can't do it, uncertain, I'm going to get it wrong, I don't know enough, I'm not good enough, not fitting in, not wanting to look incompetent, loss of a secure base. So hopefully, you know, that will be replaced by these. So, you know, we can feel secure, we can build our resilience, we can grow in our confidence, we can be realistic about what areas we need to improve on and what areas we need to get some support with. You know, we can act on feedback, we can have hopefully a little bit more self-belief, and have a sense of belonging. You know, these webinars have been absolutely fantastic in that it is a real community. You know, we do join together on a Wednesday night and we do feel part of something, even if we're not in our uni lectures or we're not in our offices. We do have that
Connection.
That option. Connection, that's the word I was looking for. Couldn't find it, could you tell?
And
yes,
the other thing is
yeah.
We've obviously spoke about a lot of difficulties that we've all experienced, but and a couple of people have said that they're, you know, worried about starting their journeys or going into practice. What you've got to remember is the impact that we're having on the people that we're supporting, and you know, remember those thank you cards. Look back at the feedback you've been given. I had a thank you card yesterday from a family who no longer needs my support. And I've had feedback from the little boy that I ended up removing, saying that I was the one that was there for him and he felt safe. So we need to be remembering of all the people that we are there for. And although it's tough for us and we have difficulties, you know, we need to remember who we're there for and the impact that we're having on them.
Yeah, why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
It's all about the why, isn't it? It's all about the why. And,
It is.
Yeah, why are we doing what we're doing, which is the centre one in the onion model.
There you go.
That's right in the middle, and hopefully it won't make you cry, you know, like an onion.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us tonight, the three of you. I know that you've been delivering like half days on this and even whole days on this, obviously more than just the session you've done tonight, but it was fabulous. Thank you so much. I can't see the chat, as you know, but there is that bit about as you've just said, not wanting to put people off, but actually wanting people to recognise this is a feeling that you're going to experience, and it's okay. And actually, you're going to experience, imposter syndrome for some extent, even when you're 31 years qualified. And I think in some ways, it's actually not necessarily a bad thing. What's the bad thing about imposter syndrome is all the feelings that it brings with it, all the anxiety, all the potentially sometimes paralyzing people from moving forwards. The actual imposter syndrome is in some ways it's healthy to keep us in check, I suppose. And actually, there's been some comments on Twitter tonight. There's a thread that I think we'll probably try and retweet, where Rob Mitchell is saying, don't overcome the imposter syndrome. It's a good safety check to help remind us that to many people we are the imposters, and it also keeps us grounded. And it's the social workers who are very, very sure of themselves who've always worried me, not the ones that are questioning their role. And I think that's key, isn't it, really, is professional curiosity, continually questioning our role, continually questioning ourselves, but also doing that in a way which is healthy for everybody and doesn't paralyze us from being able to move forward. So it's getting that balance, as social work is always about balance. But I think you've brought some great balance to the session tonight. Thank you very much for sharing it. I know that you felt like imposters at the start of the session as well, so but that's fine. I often feel like an imposter in the webinars on a Wednesday night. So, but thank you ever so much for sharing with us.
Thank you.
Of what's coming up, just because we always finish with these slides. What we've got coming up next week, we're doing co-production at the kitchen table, where we've got some guests coming to talk about co-production in social work education. It'll be fascinating, I'm sure. And then we're doing a back to basics, building a body of theory, and I think this will be a really good one for students and practice educators and everybody really in social work, as a back to basics, thinking about the body of theory. And then we're going to be joined by two fabulous guests, Samurai social worker and then Caroline Aldridge. So please do, the links will be dropping in the chat at the moment. And it just remains for me to say thank you very much to Chris, Kat and Kelly, who I'm sure will have the final word and say goodbye. And I'll let you do the waves tonight. You can finish off instead of starting up, Kelly. You can wave instead of saying hello.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.